Hello everybody, my name is Andy. Welcome back to my YouTube channel where I usually talk about sex education topics more or less every single week. And this week, although no different, is about something we really have to talk about, which is Sex Education Series 2 on Netflix. Now, if you watch my channel regularly, you're probably somebody who's already gone onto Netflix and watched through this, but let me tell you, there will be some spoilers in this video, and I've got a lot to talk about. I did a video last year, which you can see up here somewhere, where I talked about season 1, and I obviously think that the show is brilliant. It was definitely my favourite show of 2019, and Sex Education season 2 is my most favourite show of 2020 so far. So in this video, I'm going to go through some of the subjects and things that they touched on, and I can't believe how much they got into 8 episodes of about 45 to 50 minutes each. So we're talking 6 to 7 hours of content. So for those of you who don't know, Sex Education is a series set in a British school somewhere. It's not a city school, it's in the countryside, and although it is a British school, it seems to be sixth form only, so only 16 and 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds. And there are plenty of North American references. So there's definitely like rows of lockers, an emphasis on scholarships and that kind of thing. So there is definitely a kind of mid-Atlantic feel to it. There's also a kind of timeless feel to it. There is internet and smartphones, but all the vehicles and the general decor seems to be from more like the 70s and 80s. So that is on purpose. I believed, and I found out this to be true, that they weren't aiming for a specific time period. They wanted to make it as if it was timeless. There was no specific date that this action was happening on. The main character is called Otis, and he is 16 years old. He hasn't had sex yet, and he is the son of somebody who is a clinical sexologist and does therapy sessions with people and vagina workshops and all sorts of things like that. That means he's picked up loads of knowledge about sex education, SRE in general, sexualities, fetishes. He knows the book, but he doesn't have the experience. So in season 1, he set up a sex clinic where people would come and pay money to come and see and get his advice on sex and sexual health issues. And he was known as the Sex Kid. I think that's enough for an overview. But I just want to say that season 1 was a much more of a kind of utopia of sexual liberation. There wasn't so much in the way of dissent around the topics tackled. Everything was taken at face value. Everything was fine. Everything was like, oh yeah, that makes sense, yeah? And that's great, and it was actually really revolutionary. But what I found in season 2 is that it was perhaps more grounded in real life. There was a lot more conflict and dissent and hysteria. There was so much tackled this season. And starting off with the first episode, like I said, there's going to be spoilers, so just so you're aware. In the first episode, it opens up with the whole school thinking that they have chlamydia because there is a rumour is that you can catch it by breathing it in. Of course, by the way, if you're watching this, I'm not sure, that is not true. You can only get chlamydia by fluids passing between you and somebody else, usually with genital to genital contact. But the point is, you definitely can't just breathe it in. So there's lots of misinformation flying around, which of course is exactly what it's like in real life. And also the hysteria that everybody must have it. Now with good sex education, hysteria shouldn't happen. It should be general knowledge that you can't catch chlamydia like this. But it's a good opening. It proves that sex education is sorely needed, because if you don't have the information, then you might believe anything. They also touched on bi and pansexuality, and particularly actually pansexuality, because although bisexuality, it should be obvious to a lot of people what they mean by that. Basically, it's if you fancy more than one gender. Pansexuality is you don't care about what the person's genitals are, you're attracted to the person. There was also an asexual storyline, so there was a character who was the leading role in the school play, playing Juliet, and she thought that she was asexual. And she particularly found it uncomfortable when she was doing the play and, of course, being Juliet. There's a lot of sexual attraction between her and Romeo, okay? That's obviously the point in Romeo and Juliet. There was sexual debuts in this season, and, of course, they are very important. And it's nothing about losing your virginity, but when it is your first time, it is scary, it is confusing, and it's often underwhelming, right? And this in particular was a very underwhelming first time. It was the main character, Otis, and he had been building up to having sex with his girlfriend, and then he broke off with his girlfriend before they had sex. So he got drunk at a house party, his own house party, and ended up having sex with somebody that he didn't really care about. And for Otis, this was a big deal because his first time was important to him, and it ended up being a bad mistake as far as he was concerned. So this ended up being a storyline about emergency contraception as well, because the girl that he had sex with wasn't sure if a condom was used, and they couldn't find the condom afterwards. So the next day they went to the chemist to go and get some emergency contraception. There was also storylines around controlling relationships. So at one point, Otis's girlfriend of the time said that he couldn't see somebody else and still be boyfriend and girlfriend. So there's that. That's not okay, by the way. Anybody wondering if that's all right? It's definitely not okay to demand that somebody can't be friends with somebody else to stay your boyfriend or girlfriend. And mutual masturbation was it must be the first time this has been broached on British television, if you could call Netflix television, but I do. They have television awards, it must be television, right? But in mainstream British television, mutual masturbation, this must be the first time it's been broached. Basically, two characters, one of them has problems with things being inserted into her vagina, except when it's her. So the other character has the idea of mutual masturbation, where they're enjoying each other's company and masturbating at the same time. Okay, on to some storylines which really stood out for me this season. And top of the list that I have here is Amy's storyline about sexual assault. So the story is that Amy gets the bus into school, and this one time she gets on the bus and a guy is rubbing against her and is masturbating right next to her because he's using her as sexual gratification. He ends up ejaculating onto her jeans, and she manages to get off the bus, and she walks to school where she tells her friend Maeve. At first, Amy seems to think this isn't much of a deal, and it's fine, it happens, you just have to deal with it. And I'm sure that happens a lot. But Maeve convinces her to go to the police. The police are really good. They deal with it really well. They do give her an honest opinion if they're going to catch the guy or not. And I don't think they do that in the end. So there is this feeling every time that Amy gets on a bus or attempts to get on a bus that the same thing's going to happen again. As we go through the series, it really affects her. She has a boyfriend, and in the end, she can't let her boyfriend touch her in any way. That's how bad it gets for Amy. And it kind of makes you reassess your own actions to somebody who this happens to. So, for example, if I was Amy's boyfriend, how could you deal with that? Surely you'd just want to give her a big hug. But she can't stand being touched by men at this time. And it's all down to this one incident on the bus. So how would I, as a man, support somebody like that? And it kind of makes you reassess what you would do. I thought it was a great storyline, really well told. The good news is that she does get over it in the end, because, at least in part, all her female friends meet her at the bus stop and help her get on the bus and go all the way into school. And at the end of the series, she allows her boyfriend to cuddle her. So that's a good ending. And I thought it was a really, really well written story and well acted story and a fantastic theme throughout the series. It seemed innocuous at the start of the series, but as the series progressed, it was definitely something which bound the season together. So for the first time, there was a disabled character in the series, and it was good, I thought, that they didn't make this character an angel. He definitely was a bit of a dick, and indeed at the end of the series, he does something, and this is not going to be a spoiler because it's the end of the series, and it really would ruin the series if you haven't watched it yet. At the end of the series, he does something which is a total dick move, because often disabled characters in dramas are portrayed as angels, can't do anything wrong, deserve all the help they can get, etc., etc. Whereas he's actually somebody who steals things, gets other people to help him out with theft and deception. So indeed, far from being an angel. And also in the series, there was tackling of gay shaming people for being gay or being LGBTQ+. So Adam, who is one of the major male characters in the show, he was sent to military school at the end of the last season. So in military school, there were a couple of people who are gay, but they didn't want to tell anybody. Adam walks in on them. Adam is by himself, but nobody really knows that. So although Adam walks in on them, he says he was not going to tell anybody, and he doesn't tell anybody. But then the two characters plant some drugs in his bed, and he is kicked out of military school. And they do that to avoid him having the opportunity of telling other people about their sexual preferences. So they are ashamed of being gay. And so is Adam. He's repressing his gay tendencies. And when Adam is kicked out, he tries to start a relationship with one of the other characters, but because he's ashamed of being gay, he has to do it after dark and out of sight of other people, and he's not happy to know that he wants to be in a relationship with somebody of the same sex. And the final theme throughout the series is about the sex education curriculum. So Jean Milburn, who is Otis's mum, who is the sex therapist, she comes into school as a consultant, for want of a better description, and she's trying to work out what the children want as part of their sex education curriculum. Well, it's actually a front to her giving advice. So, for example, the girl that I talked about earlier who was asexual, she comes into Jean Milburn and tells her about this, and Jean gives her a whole bunch of advice and tells her it's fine, and ends up being this kid's hero. But because this isn't on the curriculum, this girl doesn't think it's normal for her to be asexual. She thinks that because she just doesn't like sex and doesn't want to do sex, she thinks that it's strange, there's something wrong with her. And there's various things throughout the series that students come in to talk to Jean about. And it's basically trying to build up what should be in the sex education curriculum. And I thought that this was a link to what's going to be happening here in the UK in September. The new guidance, I definitely talked about it on the channel before, but this new guidance is going to be compulsory to have relationships and sex education in schools in England and Wales. And it was a nod to that. It was a nod to what should be in that curriculum and how it should be taught. So the long short of it is that I think the series is fantastic. If you haven't seen it yet, then it is on Netflix. The whole season's on there. You can watch it over a couple of days. You can watch it in an entire day if you want to binge watch it. but I thoroughly recommend doing so. It covers so much, like I say, in just over 6 hours worth of television. You will not regret it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then give it a thumbs up. You can do that just down below. I make videos every single week, usually on sex education topics. So subscribe and click the little bell just down there. And I will hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.